Welcome to the Fast Leader Podcast, where we explore convenient yet effective shortcuts that will help you get ahead and move forward faster by becoming a better leader. And now, here's your host, customer and employee engagement expert, and certified emotional intelligence practitioner, Jim Rimbach.
The number one thing that contributes to customer loyalty is emotions. So move onward and upward faster by gaining significantly deeper insight and understanding of your customer journey and personas with emotional intelligence. With your empathy mapping workshop, you'll learn how to evoke and influence the right customer emotions that generate improved customer loyalty and reduce your cost to operate. Get over your emotional hump now by going to empathymapping.com to learn more. Okay, Fast Leader Legion, today I'm excited because I have somebody on the show today who's going to bring some humanity to something that oftentimes doesn't seem so human. For many authors, art comes from chaos. For Jillian Medoff, it's the exact opposite. The eldest daughter of a traveling salesman, Jillian moved 17 times by her senior year in high school. Although she's been writing fiction, she was 8 years old when she knew that the way she'd eventually earn money would have to be separate from her artistic life. Having steady, stable employment not only offered her financial security, it also ensured she'd never be forced to write solely as a means to pay rent. As a result, she's pursued two distinct, unrelated careers over the past few decades, becoming a solid corporate citizen during business hours while earning a master's in fine arts and publishing 4 novels in the shadows. Jillian's day job is in management consulting. She's worked for a range of employers, including Deloitte, Aon, Revlon, and Max Factor. Now, as a senior consultant with a professional services firm in New York City, she advises clients on communication strategies for all aspects of employee experience, such as workforce engagement, performance management, and professional development. She's fluent in HR practices and procedures with deep subject matter expertise in benefits and pay programs. At the same time, she's a novelist whose character-driven books examine complex family dynamics. Her current novel, This Could Hurt, is a hilarious dissection of a corporate family through the lens of 5 HR colleagues grappling with professional and personal challenges in the aftermath of the 2008 financial collapse. Her other novels include I Couldn't Love You More, Hunger Point, and Good Girls Gone Bad. Jillian currently lives in Montclair, New Jersey with her husband Keith Dawson and 3 children, Sarah, Olivia, and Molly. Along with her job at Siegel Consulting, she's working on her next novel, A 21st Century Bonfire of the Vanities. Jillian Medoff, are you ready to help us get over the hump?
I sure am. Happy to be here.
Well, I'm glad you're here. I've given our Legion a little bit about you, but can you tell us what your current passion is so that we can get to know you even better?
Sure. I actually think of my novels as a passion, even though it is work. I work during the day as a management consulting, as you said, and I've had a long career in communications, corporate communications. But my biggest passion of my life, other than my children and my husband, is crafting very long but readable novels about family systems that are either, traditional families or corporate families, like the one in my new novel.
It's really interesting listening to you say that, is that, you said family systems, and oftentimes we think about, HR or human resources as just a load of systems, but that's not what this book is about. This book is about what I had mentioned as far as it's the humanity in HR, which oftentimes just doesn't seem like it's there.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I think when people consider HR, it's either they underestimate the value that HR brings to an organization, or they are terrified. I mean, when someone says HR has called, I got a call actually myself from HR the other day, and I sort of panicked. And all she wanted to do was say that she had read an essay that I'd written for LinkedIn. So I think one of the real driving forces of my novel was to find the humanity in a culture that's traditionally driven by the bottom line. And to do that, I drew on my own experience working in an HR department right after the market crash in '08. And I really found out a lot about HR itself, but also what the misperceptions that the public has about HR as a discipline.
Even when you're saying that, I start thinking about, and based on a comment that you had said a moment ago, is that, you talked about value of HR to an organization. Mm-hmm. But for me, oftentimes I see that, HR is one of those things, like certain parts of the organization, which may be, outsourced or stripped down to its skeleton. And so when you start talking about, the value of the human capital and the importance of, retention and skill sets and buy-in and culture and all of those things. How does that really fit? I mean, is it really, a value statement to make if you're going to be, stripping down HR or even outsourcing it to somebody else?
Oh, I think that stripping down HR is totally contradictory to the ethos of what HR should be within an organization. I mean, back in the late 70s, I think it was around, and HR was really created, maybe even earlier, at the height of unionization to be an advocate for employees. And then over the years, the fundamental philosophy of some HR departments changed, where they became less an advocate for the employee and more of a strategic partner to the business, which meant that their goals aligned with the business goals of the company. So if the business goals of a company are to drive revenue, decrease in expenses, and stay out of court, then they become less an advocate for the employee and more an advocate for the organization. So it puts HR in this very strange place, which is, on one hand, you have employees who need advocates, not just for issues like disability and medical benefits, but also for issues that you see in the news now, like sexual harassment and discrimination. And at the same time, you have the organization saying, well, we can't have liability. So HR then has all this information about employees, and then and what do they do with it? Who do they advocate for? So, for instance, in the case of like Harvey Weinstein, if HR knew what was going on for years before anything was said, people are asking in the public, well, if HR knew, why weren't they advocating for the employee? But in fact, they were advocating. They were advocating for Harvey Weinstein, who is also an employee of the company. So I think HR is, on one hand, I think HR is given a lot of responsibility and no means to enforce it. So, for instance, if it's HR's responsibility to come up with policies that illustrate or enforce the company's goals, but they don't have the power or they don't have buy-in from senior leadership, they're sort of, hampered. And then going one step further, when you strip down an HR department, you really lose a vital function of the company that understands its employees, understands what value they bring. I mean, if you think about it this way, an employee, a staff, is really an organization's most fundamental and valuable asset. Your employees are what drive the organization. And when you don't have a department that understands who they are, what they can do on a personal level, not just on a function level, then you lose an entire aspect of that workforce. I mean, when HR employees know the employees that they're working with, they know their coworkers, they know their strengths, they know where the challenges lie, they can really help put them in roles that play to their strengths and that ultimately help the organization. When you strip down HR to a function, you lose that essence. You lose the true humanity of what HR does bring to an organization. It's about human resources. It's about human. It's not necessarily just about resources.
Okay, now listening to you talk, I started thinking about a lot of organizations right now that are needing to and must go through some type of transformation process. So when I start thinking about the impact and effect of HR from an asset perspective, and what they can actually assist with and provide in that HR or in that transformation process. But if they are hampered, so over the course of time, it has been shifted to where they are more functional, than finesse in providing value. But now we have to go through a transformation process. How can they actually do things differently, or what do they need to do in order to really drive that transformation process?
Well, one of the things that HR traditionally has done is undersold itself and really presented itself as a place where that it's administrative. They file forms and they process claims and they come up with Spirit Week and Hat Day and that kind of thing. But in fact, I think with solid messaging and branding, an HR department can then become for the employees a source of strength, of advocacy, of where change really can happen on a individual contributor level. So in other words, if I think of HR as the place to go and they're going to file my claims and that do administrative details and that's about it, then I'm not necessarily going to see the value of HR. However, if HR, rebrands itself, whether it's human capital or, some sense of the department as having strength, power within the organization, then I'm going to use it more to my advantage to help advance my career. Like if I'm with an organization and I know that HR not only has a lot of personal information, but it also has information about me relative to where I can go within the organization, I'm definitely going to leverage their knowledge base and tools to help define my career and grow within the organization. I think that ultimately HR needs to have a reckoning with itself within the organization. Like, what do we want to do? What do we want to be? And how do we present ourselves to our colleagues and to senior leadership?
Well, that's a good point. So they have to go through their own transformation too, don't they?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think it's kind of, at one point, if you're aligning your goals with the organization, you lose a lot of employee buy-in because I don't want to go to HR for my personal problems if I feel like they're much more inclined to side with the organization. But if an HR department presents itself more as being as objective as they can, but also confidential, I mean, I think there's a lot of confidentiality issues that HR can truly leverage to say, we are here for you. We have resources that help protect your confidentiality. We have third-party advocates that you can use, that you will not be in any way, if you want to report something or if you want to just even talk to us about where you'd like to go professionally. I think that there are tools and resources that HR can take advantage of to help employees help themselves. And that would be one step in a more positive direction.
And it's interesting. One of the things too, when you start talking about, that dynamic, as well as, humanizing HR is, in the book, of course, there's several components that really make it real because we're talking about, a novel and a story of people's lives, is that you often refer to and address the whole generational dynamic within HR departments that you'll find. There's also gender dynamics too, right? So
right.
When you start talking about, those elements within HR and the work that you're doing with organizations, how oftentimes do you think that that HR isn't, helping themselves or doing things in a manner by which they can become that more valued asset?
Well, one of the things about the book that I really wanted to convey is the fact that every organization is its own microcosm or its own very small universe with its own dysfunction, with its own logic. And I think in the book, you see this small research company contextually because it's at a year after the financial crash. There's been a series of layoffs. So now they're very, very lean. HR is almost at the point at which an organization would farm out the department or, hire someone to do the HR arm and just get rid of them. So I really wanted to show an HR department sort of under siege. And within that department itself, there are generational dynamics and there's all kinds of other personal issues that come into play. But I think on the larger scale, one of the things that HR has traditionally not been very good at is communicating with employees. And I'm not talking about just, branding themselves and having a philosophy. I'm also talking about having a consistent voice when talking to employees, making sure that the messages that you're getting across from HR to employees are as appropriate for the audience as possible. So, for instance, one of the things that we talk about when I'm in my business life is helping HR communications segment their communications so that they target the markets or the audiences that they really want to reach. For instance, you wouldn't necessarily talk to a millennial generation the same way you might talk to people who are starting to think about retirement. So let's say, for instance, we're talking about financial wellness or you would talk about it differently with millennials than you would with, let's say, people, they're baby boomers. I hate to use those kinds of, buzzwords, but in fact, it's an easier way of saying, people in their 60s versus people in their 30s. With people in their 30s, you're going to talk about financial wellness and holistic ideas about retirement. When you get to when you're trying to talk to people in their, early 60s, you talk about retirement readiness. And I think HR has always, from the companies that I've worked for, and as opposed to the companies that I have also been I'm an employee of a company, and I am also a consultant to companies. And the companies that I have worked for have not been very good at targeting the messages that they want to get across to different generations or different groups within the organization, different demographics, levels, that kind of thing. And so as a consultant, what I'm really one of the key strategies that we bring is niche marketing, target marketing, how to make sure your messages get across correctly. So once you start having that consistent tone, you have your audience segmentation is defined, and then you start to see HR as a more authoritarian voice and a more a voice that you want to pay attention to. So in that way, by making their messaging and communications stronger, HR then has a stronger presence.
Well, and as you're sitting there talking, I've started thinking about they're becoming, more customer-centric, employee-centric, more human-centric, and they've got to increase their own emotional intelligence to connect, with their audience so that they themselves, have and gain engagement and trust. So it's that type of conversation, and what you just went through is very similar, inside and outside the organization. So I think that's fascinating.
Oh, thank you. One of the things that I also think is very interesting is how you have senior leadership wanting their HR department to have more of a presence and be more authoritarian, not authoritarian in a negative way. I mean, just have more cachet, have more strength, to not be viewed as just administration and clerical staff, but to be viewed as strategic partners of the business who can help their employees live their best life, for want of a better phrase, but find professional growth and development. But a lot of times the senior leaders they won't put resources toward human resources. They don't pay for an internal communications arm. They don't help HR financially having good communicators, having strong philosophy, having a good brand, that costs money. And on one hand, senior leadership wants HR to be a force within the organization, but on the other hand, they don't put enough budget behind it so that HR can do the kinds of things and be the kind of department that they want. So sometimes it's not HR's fault. I mean, sometimes HR is at the mercy of what senior leadership is willing to, how far they're willing to support them.
Well, that's interesting because, that's the same case that so many different groups within an organization are contending with. And it comes down to them being or needing to do a better job at business acumen to be able to present those cases to the executive level to say and do just that. Hey, do we want to improve our retention rates? Do we want to improve our buy-in rates, which is going to result in, X, Y, and Z from a financial perspective? And therefore, if you want to do that, this asset that you have here requires investment. And this is the type of investment that it requires.
Oh, absolutely. I think a lot of big companies, certainly like, JP Morgan Chase, those big organizations, they understand the value of HR and the value of human capital, and they know how to leverage it. They're also doing it on a larger scale. But a lot of my clients are mid to small, maybe 1,000 employees or at the most 5,000 employees. And those are the organizations that I just don't think that senior leadership puts enough money behind, or they don't put enough support behind HR. It's the mid-level group that really suffers from a lack of consistency with HR philosophy versus, output, like what HR can do. And you see that a lot in some of these, in the news lately. You see this a great deal, where on one hand, HR is getting just excoriated for all the ways that they fell down on the job when it comes to diversity and sexual harassment. But on the other hand, HR, you can't expect HR to do all the heavy lifting itself. You can't empower a department without giving them the resources, the funding, you can't expect HR to do it all themselves, I guess is the bottom line. And in large companies, they understand this. And I'm talking about really big companies with a lot of social cachet and a lot of money. But it's the mid-level organizations and the smaller organizations where they want HR to do and be all things, but they don't give them the financial support.
I think that's a good point. And I mean, when we start talking about HR, when we start talking about engagement, when we start talking about connection and communication, there's a whole lot of passion associated with that. And one of the things that we look at on the show to help give us some of that passion are quotes. Is there a quote or two that you like that you can share?
Yes, it's my favorite one, and it's "Hitch your wagon to a star." It's Ralph Waldo Emerson, and it's really kind of, I think, very appropriate for business, because it's sort of like that when you're looking at your professional development, when you're looking at what you want to bring to an organization, really strive to find your best self and find peers or mentors that you admire and emulate them. I mean, I think that to me is the essence of business leadership.
Oh yeah, I mean that quote has a lot of different angles that you can actually use it for. So when you start looking at the difference in what you do from a consulting perspective, your passion for writing and how you've written several books, and just the whole course of life, I'm sure there was a lot of humps that you had to get over that brought you where you are today, and also where you're going. So is there a story that you can share with us when you've had to get over the hump?
Oh, absolutely. There was a period in 2008 where I had sold 2 novels, and they hadn't, one had done very well, one hadn't done that well. And I really felt like I was at the end of my writing career from a professional standpoint. Like, I figured I would always be writing, but I would not necessarily sell. And so I spoke to the woman who is now my literary agent and who had been the editor of my first novel. And she, in 1997, my first novel, Hunger Point, came out. She was the editor. In 1998, she went and joined a literary agency. So now it's many years later, and she's a big agent, and my writing career had, it really had hit the skids in a lot of ways. And I went and I talked to her, and I said, look, I have this manuscript. It has been to 28 publishers. All of them have rejected it. And I think I'm done. I mean, I think I really have reached the end of my career. And she said, wait a second, let's back up. You need to really sit down with yourself and think about, what do you want to do as a novelist? I mean, where do you want to go? And I said, but it doesn't really matter where I want to go. It's what the publishers are buying. And she said, no, that's not true. You have to really sit down and think about your art and think about commerce and think about what makes sense. And you have to decide what you want to do. And then we'll get you there. And I thought that was really crazy, but I did what she said. I sat down, I worked on the book that I presented to her that had been rejected by 28 publishers. I took 2 years, I rewrote it, and then I started working on, we ended up selling it in 2 weeks. We got 2 offers. It came out in 2012 and it was a bestseller. It's called I Couldn't Love You More. And so this was in 2010. I had sold I Couldn't Love You More. And I really started thinking about what I wanted to write about, what I was interested, what my passion was. And it was really about corporate life. And I wanted to write a novel about this. And so for the next 7 years, I worked on a novel that I thought would never see the light of day. But it was what I was truly passionate about. It was the course of my 30-year career. It was taking all the talents that I'd had as a novelist, all my experience as a corporate worker, and I put it into this novel, and it came out last month. And so the hump was, oh my God, I will never sell another book. But the true lesson was, find your passion, look within yourself, don't look at the market, look at how you want to write, stick with it. And that's what really led me to the success of this novel.
Well, and we definitely hope that you continue to focus on that passion so that you can release good works like this. So the Fast Leader Legion wishes you the very best. Now, before we move on, let's get a quick word from our sponsor. Call Center Coach develops and unites the next generation of call center leaders. Through our e-learning and community, individuals gain knowledge and skills in the 6 core competencies that is the blueprint that develops high-performing call center leaders. Successful supervisors do not just happen. So go to callcentercoach.com to learn more about enrollment and download your copy of the Supervisor Success Path ebook now. All right, here we go, Fast Leader Legion. It's time for the Hump Day Hoedown. Okay, Jillian, the Hump Day Hoedown is a part of our show where you give us good insights fast. So I'm going to ask you several questions, and your job is to give us robust, yet rapid responses that are going to help us move onward and upward faster. Jillian Medoff, are you ready to hoe down?
I'm ready to hoe down.
All right. So what do you think is holding you back from being an even better leader today? Self-consciousness. What is the best leadership advice you have ever received?
Treat others the way you would like to be treated yourself. Lead others the way you would like to be led.
What is one of your secrets that you believe contributes to your success?
I will never give up.
What do you feel is one of your best tools that helps you lead in business or life?
Compassion.
What would be one book that you'd recommend to our listeners? And it could be from any genre. And of course, we're going to put a link to all 4 of your books on your show notes page, including your latest, which is This Could Hurt.
Emotional intelligence.
Okay, Fast Leader listeners, you can find links to that and other bonus information from today's show by going to fastleader.net/Jillian Medoff. Okay, Jillian, this is my last Hump Day Hoedown question. Imagine you were given the opportunity to go back to the age of 25, and you've been given the opportunity to take the knowledge and skills that you have now back with you. But you can't take everything back. You can only choose one. So what skill or piece of knowledge would you take back with you, and why?
Okay, if I could take one skill set that I have now, it's that I understand novel writing in a way that I didn't back at 25. I spent a lot of time and a lot of energy being insecure about what I was working on. And I think that what I would teach my younger self is to trust yourself in the moment and keep going. You can always edit. You can always go back and edit, but just going forward, just get the words down and trust yourself because you know what you want to say.
Jillian, it was an honor to spend time with you today. Can you please share with the Fast Leader Legion how they can connect with you?
Yes, you can absolutely email me anytime, jillianmedoff@gmail.com. And I'm happy to talk about anything from management consulting to writing novels.
Jillian Medoff, thank you for sharing your knowledge and wisdom. The Fast Leader Legion honors you, and thanks you for helping us get over the hump. Thank you for joining me on the Fast Leader Show today. For recaps, links from every show, special offers, and access to download and subscribe, if you haven't already, head on over to fastleader.net so we can help you move onward and upward faster.